Hey, Trev, good to see you, mate. How are you?
I'm good, Mark. Thanks. How are you keeping yourself, mate?
Yeah, good, mate. Thanks for joining me. Right, we've got some interesting stuff going on. Look, I just want to show you an email I received this morning, and then we'll have a discussion about this, I think. So I'm just going to share my screen with you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an email I received this morning. Can you see that okay?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It's come through. Brilliant.
Yeah, it said, Mark, I hope you and your family are keeping well and safe. I hope you don't mind me asking for your assistance. Do you have anything official from the SA or yourself that outlines how to deal with an incident keeping social distancing? We work for the local council and I have staff in buildings where people attend for benefits, etc. As I'm sure you are aware, they turn up under the influence of some form of substance and are not very cooperative. As a result, they have to be ejected from site. Thanks for your help. Stay safe. Name withheld. Now, I've had a conversation with this person as well.
Yeah.
On the phone, and talked him through some stuff, and basically gave him my opinion. But I'm just wondering, based on this, what would you advise these people to do?
Well, I think in the first instance, we just kind of touch on the aspect that you mentioned about the SIA. I think one of the factors within this is that I have to confess, and I'm not sure from your perspective, but I've seen nothing come out from the SIA around management of COVID and infection control and PPE measures.
Yeah.
So I think that's one factor that needs to be included within this. But certainly from the broader perspective, and some of the things we spoke about recently about, let's look at the risk assessment and the Eric PD elements of it, and what measures is he put in place in the first instance to try and eliminate the risk around the social distancing? Yeah, because that becomes a significant factor, doesn't it? Have they got, I'm going to call it entrance control of footfall?
Yeah.
It's one of the factors that certainly needs to be considered in there, and themselves from there. And if a challenge does, if challenging or aggressive behavior, because he's talking about having to eject people.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the basis of then, let's call it violent behavior, and around known risk of violent behavior. So what discussions has he had then with, I'm going to say, the people within the benefits office?
Yeah.
What conversations he had with the senior leadership team, the benefits office, around the resources and layout of the environment itself? What measures do they have to, for example, take on hands-on control? Because if we go through the process of somebody arriving at the benefits office, because presumably at the moment then around infection control, we've got some kind of entrance control, egress and exit.
Right.
Yeah. So that's one measure, isn't it? So they've got I'm going to call it a point of control, point of entry control.
Yeah, well, I had a chat. He actually phoned me as well because I replied to his email.
Yeah.
And I said to him, I said, look, all the points you've raised, I said, you should be letting people in a controlled manner. I said, and are you doing that? He said, yeah, we have one or two people coming at a time. I said, that's great. So I said, so if the person is becoming uncooperative outside, lock the door. Don't let them in. And then you've got that contained, and deal with the people that are in there. He said, well, what happens if they're in there and then they become, violent and aggressive because they're not getting what they want to hear about their benefits? He said, and they could be under the influence of drink or drugs. He said they may have other infectious diseases. He said, and my security staff are there, should they go hands-on? And, what I said to him, I said, well, look, I said, all the risks are there. I said, from COVID, they're all well known now. I mean, you and I have spoken about them numerous times, and people watching this will understand these issues. And one of the concerns was, he said, if I have to go and buy a load of PPE, that's going to cost a lot of money because he's got a whole load of these offices that his company looks after. Right. So we talked about the reasonable practical issues and explained to him the risk v cost and what he has to consider as an organization. So I said, from my point of view, I said, what I would do, I said, if they became aggressive, bordering on violence, I said, you need to eliminate the need to restrain them at source. I said, I would get your staff and the local authority staff, wherever it is, the benefits office staff, to extract themselves via a door into another part of the building and secure themselves in there. I said, I'm presuming it's on camera. I said, over the microphone, tell the person to leave because they're now trespassing and they have to leave. If they don't leave, the police will be called. And, they may have their benefits compromised. They may stop their benefits because of their behavior until such time as whatever. I said, put that out there if that's feasible. I said, and then you've got no one, you're not at risk. And this is something I developed many, many years ago, doing lots of work for local authorities. And the question I got then was, well, if we do that, what about the other people in the reception area? Are we liable for them?
Right.
And the bottom line is the local authority fundamentally has the liability for anyone that's there. I said, but I said it's less of a risk than your staff grabbing hold of someone, trying to take control of them. And an interesting comment someone made on a thread on one of the posts I put up on Facebook was they run a martial arts school,
right?
And they've gone to a doctor and said, look, what's the risks of us, when we restart this? And the doctor has apparently said to them, well, one of the things you've got to think about, if you're doing any high intensity stuff, he said people will sweat. And if you're grabbing hold of each other when you're sweaty, that's going to increase the risk of transmission. Now, I'm not medical, so I don't know whether that's true or not, but it seems feasible enough, So I said to him, I'd extract, cordon off the area, tell him to leave. Once he's gone, when he's outside, you can then regain what you're normally doing, let people one at a time, wait till he's calmed down and get someone to speak to him from a distance. And if he becomes aggressive again, extract, So what was your take on that?
I mean, I'd certainly follow that, as you say, from a strategic plan point of view, because, let's be brutally honest, unless there's a need to actually intervene, then let's look at exit plans and withdrawal and containment within that particular area. Because if we've got them restricted in that area, i.e. the staff are behind some kind of partition safe area,
yeah.
And his staff and colleagues can withdraw and, let's say, put a barrier between us, closing the door, locking the door themselves. And I think, did you make reference to, or as a benefits officer, there must be some form of CCTV camera there?
Yeah, there's cameras there.
Yeah. Then, from that perspective, that can be monitored. And I'm sure, again, there must be some communication system, tannoy system, call it what we want, where they can have a conversation with, I'm going to call it, the guilty parties in there, or the people causing violence, to the point of de-escalation.
Yeah.
If that fails, subsequently, then, in what respect, the next obvious step would be to inform them. If they don't stop that behaviour, then they'll inform the police. Police to come along and deal with it with respect, and then once the police arrive, they can, hand it over to the police for them to take action as necessary. But I think one point within that, you got a visitor. Sorry, just threw me for a second. Hello.
He'll get on my shoulder.
Sorry, just literally, I wonder what that was just walking by. Sorry about that. But another factor within that, though, whilst that's the plan, and to most, it would seem a very good and obvious plan themselves. But I think we need to come back as well, don't we? And I don't know if this came up in your discussion with them, but have they visited in terms of the type of PPE they're wearing? Because we come back to, don't we, around, there's lots of raft of information about COVID-19, infection control PPE. You and I have spoken about this, and I'm sure many of our peers have spoken about this, but the factor of what is the quality of gloves you're wearing, and if those gloves get damaged, and coming back to your point about transmission, diseases, so if those gloves get damaged, then what measures have they got in place, because if we've got somebody who's sweaty and we're not quite sure what diseases, contaminants they've got, then that could be a factor, couldn't it, during a, let's say, a dynamic restraint, which comes up as a problem.
Well, it's what we spoke about when we did the last webinar, because anytime you introduce anything else into there, you're going to introduce additional hazards that then have to be assessed in their own right. So, what happens if they get torn? What happens if the mask gets pulled off? All those sort of things. That's got to be risk assessed as part of the process. But what's interesting is, that's an interesting email I got, because, all the focus has been on healthcare and care with all of this fundamentally. And the, security officers now are at risk. In fact, I think there was a post out the other day, or a newspaper article, or some study done by someone that says that they're in the highest risk category of death right now because of their proximity to people who have COVID. So it's nice to sort of talk about this from the security perspective, because there's a lot of security people out there doing a really good job in difficult circumstances, and they need some recognition for this as well. But it's also interesting. The fact is, it's making people think now about not going hands-on.
Yes.
And this is really good, because a lot of the emphasis is always, well, if we have to restrain, we'll restrain. We can make that decision. But now we're actually saying, look, let's go back and look at processes. And the first part of any use of force thing is it necessary? And this situation is really highlighting whether or not it's necessary to grab hold of someone, or whether you can find an alternative method. So I think a lot of good will come out of this.
Yeah, I think you highlight a very good point. And sadly, although it's come about via COVID, but you're absolutely right. It's been the fundamental strapline of what we and many of our peers have been trying to teach forever and a day, isn't it? In the first instance, think about non-verbal and verbal communication around de-escalation. So I think it follows that philosophy, doesn't it, within themselves from there. So I think you make a very valid point within themselves. I think as well, though, the other thing, we have referenced it, but we just need to, I think, just reinforce. But around the foreseeable risk and the duty of care for the senior leadership team and the benefits office.
Yeah.
Because that can't be, that's got to be a factor, isn't it? They may be security staff, and the point you made, security and many others aren't getting a lot of overt recognition around all the communication. But the fact that they're employed on the site of the benefits office, then we come back to that tangible link around duty of care, about staff working on premises.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because just let me share my screen with you once more. Give me 1 second. I want to show people this. All right. So that's the situation we're dealing with, yeah?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right. This is a case here against Luminar Leisure,
Right.
which goes back to August 2000, you can see.
Mm-hmm.
And this was where a gentleman called Mr. Hawley was punched in the face by a doorman, and he was hit so hard that he fell on the floor and he struck his head on the curb. And as a combination of that, he got facial injuries, nose injuries, jaw injuries, and he's also brain damaged. Now, the defense from this organization was, because they appealed against the charge and said, we got subcontracted door staff there. We subcontracted security officers to do the job.
Yep.
We're a nightclub. We don't do security, so the liability rests with them. But in this case, the finding was different, because Thompson Solicitors, with the aid of the Fire Brigade Union, they overturned the appeal, which was dismissed from the company. Right. And that means now that an organisation which employs contract workers can be responsible for their actions while working on the premises, depending on the level of control that they retain. And this is also a factor in the Peter Stringfellow case. It's quite a famous case that we've been talking about for years.
Yes.
Where, one of the doormen killed someone who was in Mr. Stringfellow's nightclub. Mm-hmm. So this raises the whole point that you make. It's about the liability of the organisation that's employing the security. Mm-hmm. Because as you and I know, and I'm pretty sure most everyone else knows who's watching this, you can be subcontracted for tax and national insurance purposes, but you can't be subcontracted for a duty of care, because the minute you're working on someone else's property, whoever that commissioning agency is, they have a duty of care towards you, the same as they have a duty of care towards their own staff, and that can't be subcontracted away.
Absolutely. And, and I think another factor within that, isn't it, is the fact that, let's stay with security, but a lot of security staff are employed, let's just say, at a nightclub or a venue, daytime, nighttime security, nighttime environment. But the fact is, we want to empower, as we've always done, we want to empower them, don't we, to ask those questions if they're unsure and they're uncertain themselves. Yeah, and based on the answer they get from there, then they're better informed, aren't they, in terms of what decision they're going to make to go forward. And in the extremest of circumstances, it may well be, well, you know what, based on that information, if you're not going to change your rationale, then I may not deploy or work at this venue at this particular moment.
Well, we're back to the regulation 8 of the management regulations, where they can stop work and go to a place safely if they're presented with serious imminent danger, refuse to return, while that danger's there, and all that's supported by the Employment Rights Act, where they have that right there. And also they can't be dismissed unfairly for that, because, if they're working within their rights, the employer can't punish them or dismiss them. So, it's an interesting time. It's an interesting time, but I think there's some creative stuff coming out of it. There's some good stuff coming out of it. But I'm just wondering, whether people actually get this, whether some people realize that when they bring subcontracted staff in, that they are actually 100% responsible for the duty of care while they're on their premises, because they absolutely are. And when I spoke to this gentleman this morning, part of the advice I gave him was, I said, look, go back to the local authorities that you're supplying your staff to and just ask them, what do they expect your staff to do? What's the risk assessment say? What's the policy? What's the procedure? What's the protocol? Because while your staff are there, they are basically, for want of a better word, employed by the local authority. And he said, I didn't realize that. He said, that will be my next question. And he went away. And what was nice about it was he went from a position of thinking, I've got a massive problem and I've got to buy all this PPE and do all this stuff and all the fear of then staff restraining, to actually, we've got a shared problem here and we can extract and leave if need be. And there's a different solution to it where we can coordinate and control and contain. So no, it's interesting times.
No, I think massively so. And I think as well, the other side of that, isn't it? And, for many people who go to these venues for the first time uninformed, then to get that briefing, isn't it? Because at the minute, as you say, we've got a lot of managers, employers are saying to security people when they turn up, well, you're the security person, you manage the risk. What the point we're coming to is, what is the risk? Give me some rationale around what are the dangers, what are the risks, with themselves.
I've got to tell this story.
Go.
A guy came and trained with us years ago. He was actually a hospital security officer. I think he was going to be the manager of this hospital. And when he got the job, he said to them, what's my brief? What do I do? And they said, right, what part of what you do is, if there's an alarm call from A&E, you need to run there and restrain someone if they're being violent. He said, great, okay, no problem with that. He said, do I get the training? They said, what training? He said, restraint training. They said, why do you need restraint training? You were in the army. He said, I drove tanks. But it's this association between, you've been in a particular job, you must understand how to do this task because there is some inherent link somewhere, when actually there isn't, and people are being put in positions where they expect to do stuff. And risk assessments is a prime one, where they say, well, go and do the risk assessment. well, what training competence has that person got to do the risk assessment? Because
Yes.
you and I know any decent lawyer who's worth his salt is going to say in a civil case, can I see the risk assessment? Right. Okay. Who did it? You know, and if it's not done properly, that's going to be torn to shreds. But yeah, so I just want to show this last one because, you know, I've got to share my screen. Hang on.
It's all right, no problem.
Oh, amateur hour. Where am I here? All right. So going back to healthcare, this is another email I received this morning.
Yep.
It says, "Hi Mark, I work for Healthcare Trust, name redacted. Obviously, he's asked me to take the names of the address redacted in a medium secure unit. They started doing PMVA, and for those who don't know what PMVA is, that's the healthcare name for physical restraint or physical intervention. They started doing PMVA again a few weeks ago for new starters only. I spoke to one of the instructors to question how. He himself had refused to teach, but others are. He said that he was told they are allowed to do the training as it is deemed business essential.
Sure. Okay.
Also now, due to a trainer becoming ill during the 5-day course, he has been told that the training will carry on, but everyone will have to wear full PPE. All the decisions are being made by one person without any consultation of trainers, etc. And no one has seen the risk assessment, so we are not sure if one took place or not. And there has been no consultation about how the decision has been made that PMVA is an essential business need. Regards," and obviously they've asked for their name and everything else to be redacted. This is someone that's quite worried. You know, they're quite concerned. I don't know them. You know, I've never met them before. I haven't taught their organization. But again, you know, there's holes in what he's writing about there that need filling, you know. First question is, how did they come to the conclusion that it was business essential?
Well, I was going to say, where do we start and how long have we got? But I think business essential, you're absolutely right. Yeah, and again, you know, we gave a talk recently, didn't we, about, you know, the hierarchy of law.
Yeah.
And although COVID-19, as serious as it is, you know, because without, what's the outcome? Then, you know, we know sadly people are dying, people are suffering illness, quite severe injury, illness. But, you know, law hasn't changed. You know, so like you, the first question is, and I can't see us getting past go, is what deems it business essential in the eyes of the person in charge here? It doesn't say his or her role or appointment, does it?
No, they asked me to leave that bit out.
Okay, sorry, my apologies. Yeah, so this senior, I'll just say this very senior person then, you know, what brought about that decision around business essential? What overrides, I suppose, the law in that person's view?
It doesn't, does it? You know,
sorry, forgive me, but it's still a question that needs to be asked, though, isn't it?
I'm going to end up getting this tattooed or making a record about this because I keep saying it all the time. You know, the law's not been suspended, amended, or redacted in any way, shape, or form. It's still there. But again, you know, it's someone's made or took the decision or made the decision without talking to the people who are going to be involved in actually implementing this decision. Now, you and I both know there's workplace consultation regulations. So I've been involved with cases in the past where you've got risk assessments and you say, well, who was consulted on this?
Yeah.
You know, well, what do you mean? Well, you're the risk assessed person. Did you consult with, in this case, for example, PMVA trainers or physical restraint trainers? Did you consult with the multiple AMDT, the multidisciplinary team? Mm-hmm. No, I took the decision. Well, that's just a one-dimensional risk assessment. You know, it's like taking an aircraft into a hangar and saying it doesn't work. Okay, you fix it. Yeah, but I'm just the avionics expert. It might be something to do with the engine. Doesn't matter. You get on with it. You know, madness, absolute crazy. But no, and we put a thread up recently about a similar thing, and I've got to say, if any of you guys are watching this, you know, all the experts that commented on the thread, it's absolutely brilliant. They've all been really giving, and the information that's been shared is fantastic, and it's good to see us all working towards a common cause here. But this is a typical example. You know, I'll show the email once again. This is a typical example of where we're getting people falling, you know, between the paving blocks, if you like. You know, there's people out there trying to do a job who are very scared and very worried. And if it is business essential, what I would want to know is, show me how you came to that conclusion. Show me the evidence that supporting that is a business essential need. And if, you know, if the risk of staff being assaulted is greater than COVID, you know, the risk of catching COVID, then yeah, you know, it doesn't have to be business essential. It can be justified on a reasonably practical basis. But it's seems to be a bit of a throwaway phrase there. So,
and I think it's good you highlight that point, though, isn't it? You know, but if the business essential need is, you know, the fear of the frequency of people getting harmed or injured severely, etc. then it's a discussion that needs to be had. We're not saying that's right, but it's a discussion that needs to be had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
that's expanding the business essential reference.
Yeah. But business essential, it's a bit of it's a bit of an elephant in the room, isn't it? It's a red herring, because it's words that are put together to mean something that actually don't actually mean anything if you can't prove it.
Yeah, indeed.
Well,
can we have a look? Could we have a look at because the next point, there's many in there, but they started doing pmva again a few weeks ago for new starters only.
Yeah.
Again, I think I want to put it in the same category as business essential, in so much as, what's the distinction about new trainees requiring or new starters requiring training that people currently in post don't need any recertification training? Either way, not that I necessarily agree that they should have training at the moment in terms of physical intervention, but I'm just going back to the question per se.
Well, I think it's the same basis on which the police are doing it in some areas now. They've got to weigh up the risk between not training new police officers, and then the risk of those officers being assaulted and not being able to serve the public and go to the public's assistance against to solve and protect them from crime, against the risk of those officers contracting COVID, because COVID's non-discriminatory. It doesn't care whether you've been trained before or not. So that's something, and I know some police trainers are doing a really good job in, at least trying to do a really good job in absolutely unique circumstances now. Unprecedented circumstances where they're balancing those risks up. And the same question has to be asked in this healthcare environment. Is there an absolute need at this moment in time to put staff through a PMVA course when you're balancing the need for them to use PMVA? Because it's not, unlike a police officer, they're not on the street solving crime every day. They're not up against the unknown. Most of the service users or patients they're going to deal with, there's probably information about them.
Exactly.
Care plans, behavioural care plans, risk assessments. And I know from a conversation I've had with someone who runs a care home recently, I said, well, why do you need to train new staff? And they said, we want the new staff to work with this particular new person that's coming into the care home. And I said, is that the only person that requires restraint? And they said, yeah. I said, well, put your existing staff that are already trained in that area and give the new starters, put them in an area where there's less risk of having to use restraint. And therefore you can warrant putting the training off until sometimes you need it. So it's making people think about this now strategically and operationally from a different perspective, where before is, all right, you've come in, we need to do training, you're on a first aid course, you're on a manual handling course, you're on a restraint course, you're on a conflict management course, and once all the boxes are ticked, you can go and work on the ward. Different set of circumstances now.
Yeah, and without repeating exactly what you said there, I think the other factors coming back to the policing side, as you say, it's significantly spontaneous they're dealing with over a significantly large geographical area, and there are elements where they're long working within that. So I think those factors, in addition to, as you say, kind of address it from that point of view, whereas here, which is a little bit unknown at the moment, but significantly around, I'm going to say there's a case file on the service user they're supporting. So there should be an element of history around the person. Just raises the points we're raising here.
Yeah, and there'll be some cases out there, I know, with ambulance transfers and patient transfer things where they either haven't got or are not being given the information about patients who've got a transfer, and they have the same difficulties then that the police have in a different environmental context, which is why, I'm going to sound like a broken record. The risk assessment is absolutely critical and crucial now. It's the hub from which everything else should come, and it's so important that people do this, because post-COVID, when things have calmed down, if there are people that have been affected by this negatively, that have been put in these positions, and they start then realizing, look, this is affecting me, I can't work, I'm going to sue. That's when the questions, the issue of risk assessments is going to be brought up, especially in a court case.
Well, I think as well, isn't it? Because some of the strategy you mentioned about, the trainer group have been submitting the information, as you say, and putting the open questions there, and we're all seeing it broadly from the same point of view, as you say, which is kind of, which is what we expect anyway. But I think those issues around, I want to call it the common law duty of care, but also linked to the issues, as you say, post-COVID or post somebody, let's say, catching the virus and subsequently suffering, fatality from the virus. So we come back to corporate manslaughter issues, don't we?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So those factors come into play.
Yeah. So, and also, we're going back to the issue there again of the whole aspect of, can staff leave the workplace, particularly if they're not being given the right PPE. Of course they can leave the workplace. And one lady I've been helping, whose daughter was in a very awkward position. She was working as an agency worker, care worker, and according to her, the organisation would not give her any PPE unless they actually were sure that the person that she was going to see in their own homes was exhibiting signs of COVID. Well, by then it's too late, You know, so I said, no, ask these questions, send her a load of stuff. And she came back and she said, thanks ever so much. She said, we've taken it up now. Because I told her, write to your local MP, write to these people. She has. And her daughter now has been furloughed, because she has a daughter as well. She's been furloughed on full pay. So we got the good conclusion there for the right reasons in that case. But it's good that we're doing this. And I appreciate you being on here, because people need to know what they can and can't do, and hopefully we're coming at this from a positive aspect where we're giving them information, because and I just want to get this point out there as well for a lot of people. This is happening. COVID's real. It's out there. I'm not saying it doesn't exist, but you know what? Don't focus on the negativity of it, please. Don't get drawn into the negativity of it. Looking at the statistics and the figures, because if that drags you down and your primary focus of your attention, your thought process is negative, sadly, and I hate to say this, but you're going to end up with the symptoms of what you're focusing on. Because 100 years ago, there was a book written, and it said that a famous doctor had done some research with thousands of people, and 70% of cases, people who go to see doctors have not got the illness. They're hypochondriacs. They've thought they had it, and they worried about it, and they've actually got it. Okay, and then Dr. Lisa Rankin has brought another book out recently that says first-year medical students, here he comes again, 71% of them end up with the symptoms of the disease that they're studying, particularly when it comes near to exam time, because when you have a focus of attention in a certain area and you emotionalize that attention, so you give it power, that goes from your conscious mind to your subconscious mind. And just like the bias thing, so if I meet you for the first time and I think, oh, Trevor's a nice guy, I might not know you, but I think he's a nice guy. My mind then goes for information to confirm that bias and finds information to rationalize my emotional decision that I like you. And this is exactly what happens. So when this goes into the unconscious mind and we think, God, I'm doomed, I'm going to die, the mind goes, right, I better find some information to support that for you, because if that's what you want, I need to give you the evidence. So if you are watching this, don't get negative about stuff, okay? It is what it is, but deal with it from a positive aspect. Sorry about that.
No, please, mate, absolutely. Just before we move on, and please, stay with it. You're right. We want to empower people. That's managers, supervisors, staff, anybody to do the right thing with themselves. And it is that most people out there mean and intend well. Yeah. From time to time, we all make mistakes. And that should be about lessons learned.
Yeah.
As opposed to just blindly going out there and being ignorant, which is a different discussion altogether. But I think on the back of that, though, and we're saying an employee's right to refuse or say no, move away, withdraw to a safe exit. But please, and again, I am going to sound like a broken record, document.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Document, get it written down. I don't think we've had this conversation before, but it always makes me smile. And I've tested this out, and I won't say research, it's tested it out. And I've actually done this, so some people might recall. But I've made reference to something that allegedly happened, let's say 8 months ago, and then people questioned me on it. But the fact I could produce a book and go, here's a date time reference of when it occurred, and that was taken on face value, And so what I'm trying to get to, though, is that without anything there, people have challenged me on it, I've admitted to those people afterwards that I'm just carrying out a little bit of an experiment.
Yeah.
What I'm trying to come to, isn't it? Without any documentation, people will challenge you and push it back to you. Then, where's your evidence? Where's your evidence? Where's your evidence? So document it. And part of that documentation, i.e., Mark and Trevel having a discussion on Friday about 20 past 2, for example, not being funny. That's the context, isn't it? That's the reference. That's what makes it tangible. Yeah. So excuse me, a quick experiment, forgive me, just in case people misunderstand where I was going with that.
Yeah. All right, mate. Well, listen, we've been running for about half an hour now, so I think they'll be sick of the sound of us by the end of this. But guys, if anyone's watching this, if you've got any questions, then email me or DM me on one of the social sites, or do the same with Trevel. We're here to help. We're here to serve as best we can. This is what we do best. So don't be shy getting in touch. People are getting in touch, and we're happy to help. I can't always promise you that the answer we'll give you is the answer you're looking for, but I'll guarantee you that we'll be absolutely honest and truthful and transparent with you and tell you what you need to know as opposed to what you probably want to know. So that's where we're coming from. Trev, any last things from you?
No, again, thanks again for the opportunity to share these and have a discussion with you, and hopefully, somebody benefits from these discussions. Appreciate it.
No, it's part of my new thing. I want to help the disadvantaged. I'm talking about you. You didn't get that.
No, I know. I was trying to let it go. You had to do it, didn't you? You had to get one.
Are you wearing trousers?
Are you wearing trousers? No. No, I'm not even going to ask you to stand up. Stay seated.
Right. On that note, mate. All right. See you later on, mate. Catch you in a bit.
Bye bye.